Recovery Elevator episode 567.
I think for me, it's less about that being my story than I realize if you don't deal with your problems will deal with you. If you don't take care of those things, they will come back and they will take you back out.
Welcome to the Recovery Elevator podcast. My name is Paul Churchill, and I'm excited to be here with you today. Listeners, on today's episode, we have Jenn. She's 52 years old, from Washington, D.C., and took her last drink of alcohol on September 3rd, 2023. Great job, Jenn. Our dry January course Restore starts in 3 days, of course on January 1st. That's at 8 p.m. Eastern. We meet 13 times live in the month of January, and this course is all about accountability and connection. The cost is $160. There's a link in the show notes. Thank you, Robin. Okay, let's get started. Today, I want to talk to you about the Dolce Vita. Now, Dolce Vita is Italian for the good life or the sweet life. It's also the name of my new book that comes out in 3 days on the 1st. So why the name Dolce Vita? Well, that's the name of the bar that I owned in Spain in my 20s that got this whole project going. I studied abroad in Granada, Spain my junior year of college, then went back for a summer with 3 friends to run a pub crawl. This is a tour of the nightlife. I then returned to America for my last semester in college, where I lined up a job in finance. What's up, Merrill Lynch? Where I was supposed to start a few weeks after graduation. I remember being totally disinterested in my future as an investment banker. And a week before college graduation, I switched career paths and went to Spain and bought a bar. That bar's name was Dolce Vita, and it was an unreal time of my life. I was 24 years old, a bar owner in the most insane nightlife in the world, and I was 100% living the Dolce Vita. But alcohol had different plans for me. Within 3 years of owning the bar, I was blacking out every night of the week, drinking beers and wine for breakfast, and started to audibly hallucinate if I didn't have a proper liquor cabinet pulsing through my veins at all times. So I did a smart thing, and I walked away from the bar. I knew I had to if I were to survive. And man, was my ego and pride crushed. I lost it all, but I still had my life. I returned from Spain in 2008, but didn't enter recovery until 2014, and then started the RE podcast for accountability in 2015. What I have learned over the years in my own recovery and while interviewing hundreds of people on the RE podcast is that the addiction is trying to get us to the true Dolce Vita, the true good life. Of course, not the Dolce Vita at the bottom of a wine bottle, because if you're listening now, you've already realized that doesn't deliver. The addiction is trying to knock you off your seat of where you internally house yourself. This is the Bruno voice I speak of, the ego. The addiction is trying its hardest, at first with gentle whispers, then with direct punches to the goat blocks, for you to separate from the voice inside the head, for you to realize that you are not the Bruno voice inside the head, but the one who experiences the thoughts. What's up, Michael Singer, the author of The Untethered Soul? French philosopher Descartes got it wrong when he said, "I think, therefore I am." With that reasoning, he could have said, "My lungs breathe, therefore I am," or "My heart beats, therefore I am." Thinking is but a function of the human body. It's not who you are. It's super fun to academically explore this, but it's an addiction accompanied with biblical amounts of pain, which you've already gone through, that forces you to embody this. So the true Dolce Vita, no, it's not 24/7 happiness, not even close. The Dolce Vita is seeing through the "I'll be happy when" trap. The Dolce Vita is stepping away from the me, and me voice inside the head and leading a life where you walk others home after you find your own footing. The Dolce Vita is recognizing oneness in a world of duality. The Dolce Vita isn't a destination that one must accomplish or arrive at, because we've been there all along, and it's the addiction that shines the light on this. So I see you navigating your own life curriculum, and it's hard. You're on the hero's journey without a doubt, but you're way closer to the Dolce Vita than you think you are. In fact, if you stop thinking, you're already there. And the way I learned how to stop thinking is to first stop drinking so then I could become aware of those thoughts. That's what this whole journey is all about. And let's not forget ice cream and sunsets. So my message for you before we enter the new year is yes, do the work. Plan for the future. Put the bottle down. But don't ignore the timeless part of you that is trying to land more and more into the true Dolce Vita. You're already there. And before we hear from Jenn, let's hear from Cafe RE.
Have you quit drinking and found yourself wondering, who am I going to hang out with now? Well, Cafe RE is the social app for sober people. If you're looking to build authentic friendships that don't revolve around alcohol, this is where you need to be. But Cafe RE isn't just for connection, it's also for support. If you're in the process of figuring out how to quit drinking, we've got you covered. With 24/7 access to a like-minded community committed to living alcohol-free, you'll never feel alone on this journey. For just $24 a month, you can be paired with an accountability partner, participate in book and movie club, and have access to over 25 live chats per week, including in-house AA meetings. And we don't just connect online. Meet up in person across the country for lunches, hikes, river trips, and even kickball. In-person connection is a staple for us as well. Cafe RE is now a nonprofit with service and giving back at the heart of our mission. Plus, members get exclusive discounts on recovery elevator courses, retreats, and alcohol-free travel experiences. Are you ready to start your alcohol-free social life? Head on over to cafe-re.org to learn more. Cafe RE, the social app for sober people.
Jenn, how are you?
Great. Thanks, Paul. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I am as well, Jenn. Let's get right into this. When was your last drink?
My last drink was September 3rd, 2023.
Right on, earlier
I don't
this
know if I
year.
actually that was my final drink, but that's the day that I stopped drinking.
Okay. All right. Yeah, you just hit 2 years then, according to that time frame. How do you feel, Jenn?
Great. I'm living my best life. I finally feel happy, joyful, and free that I can really be who I'm, my true self. And I'm just a much better version of myself than where I was before. I think this is the best gift I've ever given myself, actually.
We've said it many times on this podcast. I think sobriety is the opportunity of a lifetime to step into the things that all that you just mentioned, living our best life, probably being at the top of that list. Well, Jenn, before we get into your story, can you give listeners a little background about yourself? This is where you're from, your age, what do you do for a living? What does your family life look like? And then what do you like to do for fun, Jenn?
Okay, sure. So I live in the DC area. I'm 52. I have 2 young kids. I have a son who's 12, who's going to be 13 on New Year's. He acts like he's 20 something. I have a daughter who's 11, and I love them both dearly. They're the best thing that ever happened to me, and part of the reason, a significant reason that I got sober. I'm a civil engineer, so you can thank people like me for civilization. You may not always like the roads, but I bet you're enjoying clean drinking water and sanitation. For fun, I've traveled to over 37 different countries. I've probably been to just as many states. I found in sobriety or rediscovered that I love camping and hiking. So I do that with the kiddos. And I love music, really like alternative music. So anything goth, punk, emo, anything adjacent to that. Concerts, I go to a lot of concerts, probably once a month. And last but not least, and I didn't say this just for you, but I'm a gourmet cook. I can cook just about anything. But I do happen to like Spanish cuisine the best. And I cook a mean paella and a wonderful flan.
Okay, of the 37 countries that you've been to, what would you say, which countries have the best food?
I love the variety in a lot of different countries, but I think Mediterranean food is really solid. It's like party in your mouth, all the food groups all at the same time. It's really hard to choose. Southeast Asian for sure. I love the spiciness, the sweetness, and all those sorts of things. I have a really hard time just picking one. But like I said, if I had to pick one, it'd be Spanish, because I think the influence from the sea, from the land, and all of it come together. You've got so many cultures from like North African to, European. It's just a great melting pot of all sorts of different flavors and cultures.
So I lived in Spain for 3 years. I had a bar called Dolce Vita and Spanish food. Okay, so if I were to answer that question, I would say Mexican food and Italian food. Those are the big hitters for me. And I think worldwide, or at least in major American cities, you'll see a lot of Mexican restaurants, a lot
Hmm.
of Italian restaurants, and you don't see very many Spanish restaurants. You see a lot of tapa restaurants that pull that idea of tapas. I love the idea of tapas, but after 3 years in Spain, I was just not that hot on their food. And I remember going to Italy. And when I got off the airplane in the Rome airport, I was like, gosh dang, the food here is so good. And then I went back to Spain. I'm like, I can't crack it. But paella, that's a different thing of its own, the Mediterranean influence. I need to give
Yeah.
it another shot. And I was probably just hungover out of my mind every single morning or every day when I was eating the food there. But yeah, if you could cook one dish for the rest of your life, or what type of dish, would it be paella? What would you do?
No, honestly, I lived when I was a little kid, I lived in Germany, and I've always loved German food too. And I loved schnitzel and anything really kind of, so I'd cook myself a schnitzel with some spätzle and German cucumbers and German potato salad. And I used to enjoy that with a really good German beer, but not anymore.
Times have changed.
Times have changed, but it tastes just as good.
Times have changed as of 2 years ago and some change. Well, Jen, let's do what we came here to do. I'm going to turn it over to you with your story with alcohol. I'm going to jump in with questions. Let's do this.
Okay. So I don't remember my first drunk. I do remember in middle school drinking with some friends and it just being really cool. I loved getting drunk and that feeling. I didn't get blackout drunk, so I really got to enjoy it. It was a social lubricant, made all sorts of new friends, felt at ease. And I partied like that or drank like that throughout high school. I remember one time at a party, a friend of mine said, "You shouldn't have to drink to have fun. It just helps." And I thought to myself, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't have to drink, but I'm just doing it to have fun. And then I went off to college and I went to a military school. So we could not drink during the week, but we partied like rock stars on the weekend. We were total binge drinkers. And again, one of my classmates then said, this place creates two great things, great leaders and great alcoholics. And I come from a long, long line of alcoholism. My mother, my brother, my uncle, keeps going back. And I thought to myself, well, I'd like to be a great leader, but I am not going to be a great alcoholic. I'm going to watch my drinking. I'm aware of this as an issue, but that didn't matter. I just kept on at it. I was in peak physical condition. I exercised a lot. And I'm like, I can't be an alcoholic. I mean, I can run almost a 5-minute mile. Who does that? So then I graduated. I moved to Richmond. I lived in the city called the Fan, which is a really hip happening place, especially for young people. And there's a bar on every corner. And so there was a bar in particular, pretty much every night for several months. I'd go there and I'd sit down. I was like Norm. And, I had my drink, gin and tonic. It was ready and waiting for me. And I talked to all these people till 2 o'clock in the morning on a school night. And then finally, a couple of months later, my boss is like, okay, you can't keep doing this because if you do, you're going to lose your job. You're coming in later and later every day. You're not focused. You smell like alcohol. He's like, I did this when I was younger, and I'm telling you, you got to knock this off. And I was like, note to self, been warned. And from now on, whenever anything bad happens, I'm not doing that again. So I stopped doing that. And it was like that, right? So drunk driving, did that a couple of times. Nothing bad happened. Never did that again. Drinking on business trips, stopped doing that. And it's like you just paint yourself into a corner because there's no place else to drink but at home alone.
Jen, let me jump in and ask, was this after graduating college at the military school at a job with a civil engineering firm?
Mhm.
Your boss told you, look, if you keep this up, you're smelling like alcohol in the morning. That was the big one that stuck out for me. Like mid
Yeah.
20s here.
Yeah, in my 20s, and I like to say that somebody told me this once, it really resonated with me. I think we all have to go through 3 stages, right? There's the magic, the medicine, and the misery. And for me, drinking was magic for years. A little bit of medicine and then misery. And so this is still during the magical time. I was loving it, partying all the time. Eventually got married. I moved up to Philly. And like I said, I'm an Eagles fan. I bleed green. So don't hate on me for that. And we had a couple of kids and I started drinking more and more. And I remember I made the terrible mistake when I first got married. I promised my wife that I was not going to drink when she was pregnant, so I was going to do that with her for the 9 months. I was totally regretting that. But again, I made it the whole 9 months. I'm like, I can't be alcoholic. I stopped drinking for 9 months, right? I should be fine. As soon as my son was born, midnight bottle feedings, I had a 6-pack. Who does that? This alcoholic, right? That's not normal behavior. So same thing happened with my daughter. Didn't drink for 9 months, start binge drinking again at night. And it just got worse and worse. We got into more and more arguments, it really strained our marriage. And it was really difficult. And then we moved back down here to DC, took a new job. I was traveling a lot, 50% of the time. And so, I did a lot of parties, receptions, client events, that sort of thing. And I worked on a mega project. It was a $3 billion project that I was one of the technical leads on. So it was really high pressure. I was drinking every night on that, broke that promise to myself. And it just really caught up to me. And then, like I said, I painted myself in this corner. I was sitting in my basement. I didn't realize this because I know everybody says like, oh, COVID's when it really picked up for me. And I'm like, no, not for me though. But then I look back, I'm like, yeah, it was COVID. So I'm sitting in my basement, drinking myself, to death, literally every night. I couldn't handle myself. I'm a senior executive, right? I've got all this money. I've got all this stuff. I've got a beautiful house. I've got a wife. I got the kids. And I was miserable. I hated where I was with my life. And I was drinking myself into this oblivion. I wasn't realizing my potential as a person. I was a horrible father or parent. So I, would just get ragey drunk. My kids were afraid of me, especially my son. He would cower in my presence. And that really hurt me. So I did that. And at that point, I started thinking about taking my own life. And I wasn't at the thinking stage. I was at the planning stage. It was getting real. What's the easiest way to do this and leave as little mess as possible so other people don't have to clean it up? But I got through that. And then something happened. So I like to stay up and watch TV and drink beer. Beer was my drink of choice. And I drank a lot. 10, 20 beers a night. Did that pretty consistently. I wasn't drinking during the core days of the week, but that bled over. So it was only Friday and Saturday, and then it was Friday, Saturday, and sort of Sunday, and then Thursday. Anyway, I did that, and I used to watch these foreign language films. I love that. I've kind of got an artistic background. And that night, for whatever reason, I watched this movie called The Danish Girl. And I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a loose biography on one of the first transgender affirmation surgeries in Europe during the early 1920s. And I started thinking to myself, well, why can't I do that? Why can't I dress and live as a woman? I was like, well, what? I can't believe I'm thinking this. I'm a guy. I can't do this. This is crazy. I don't want to do this. And I just spun out of control. My drinking got worse. It was every day. It was still at night. I wasn't drinking during the day, but I was drinking myself to death. Literally, I had a chronic medical condition, diverticulitis, that started getting worse and worse and chronic, had to get surgery on that. And so after I had this existential crisis of my gender, I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know who I was anymore. And the alcohol, which I thought was helping me solve my problems, was throwing gasoline on a bonfire. So I'm getting sicker and sicker, hospitalized. I get the surgery. The surgery has complications, which are lifelong that I'm still dealing with, unfortunately. But about a month later, I had a really bad bleeding episode. I had some internal bleeding that they couldn't stop. I had multiple blood transfusions, and they were talking about removing my entire colon. And I was like, I think I want to keep that. So fortunately, the bleeding stopped. But then, and during this time, I started taking Ativan because I was horribly stressed out, terrible insomnia, and I needed to sleep. But of course, I kept drinking while I was taking it, even though you're not supposed to. And because I didn't care, because I'm an alcoholic. I wasn't drinking as much because it was really getting me even drunker. But the day I get out of the hospital, I get a call from my dad. My mom had a massive heart attack. So I fly down to Florida and put her in hospice, and she dies. And then I got even more Ativan, and I really started abusing it. But then I decided, you know what? I need to stop doing this because I like drinking. I'm not a drug addict. And Labor Day weekend, 2023, I'm like, I'm going to stop because I want to drink the way I want to drink. And so that night or the day before, I quit cold turkey. And I started going through terrible, horrible withdrawal. I didn't know it at that moment.
And this is withdrawal from Ativan.
From Ativan,
Okay,
right?
and listeners, Ativan is a class of benzodiazepines. It's basically alcohol in a pill. That's how I describe it. Think Xanax, diazepam, Valium, and Ativan,
Right.
things like that. Okay, so you quit Ativan cold turkey, which can be an ass kicking. Yeah,
Yeah. Or death, because there's only two things that can kill you in withdrawal: alcohol and benzos.
I've heard
Other
that
things
as
will make you
well.
wish you were dead, but this will actually kill you.
Yep.
So I checked myself into CATS. It's the Combined Addiction Treatment Center here in Northern Virginia to detox. And they're like, well, you need to stay here about a week. And I was like, I'm a middle-aged white guy. I got to be at work on Tuesday. Are you kidding me? They're like, well, do you want to live? And I was like, okay.
Jen, can I jump in here? There was so much that you covered, and thank you for your honesty, your
Oh,
transparency,
sure.
and thank you for being here for the one goal of helping the listener. Before we hit record, we chatted a bit, and you're like, "Hey, this is why I'm here, to let people know this is possible. You can do it. This is the program that I work." I love it. Was there a moment, you're in your basement during COVID, you're drinking, and all those things that you were saying, that it come to a point? And the big one for me that stood out was your son cowering when you were in his presence. Was there a moment where it all came to a front, like, wait a second, this has to stop, I have to do something, external needs to come in to help? Was this when you quit Ativan cold turkey? And I was confused there as well, just from when we start. You had Jen.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to confuse you. So, and that's part of my story, because I didn't want to quit drinking at first, but everything came to a head when I went to rehab. And I realized I had been praying and praying because of all that horrible stuff that had been going on for a solution. And I ended up in rehab because of the drug abuse. And I was in a meeting and I finally realized I'm in the right place. And if I just surrender right now, I can get the help that I need. This is your only chance. You got to do this right at this second. And so I just said, this is my name and I'm an alcoholic. And everything changed from that day. It was like this watershed moment where it all made sense. It all came together. I knew what I needed to do, and I never looked back. All those things that I was dealing with, all those problems, I was finally in the right place. And so from that point on, didn't drink ever again, didn't drug ever again. Went to an IOP program, got a sponsor, worked the 12 steps. And, during this time, I was dealing with, so I guess back to your question, there were those moments, but they weren't enough. Having my son be afraid of me was not enough. But all this stuff coming together and given that one chance and knowing that I had to do it right at that second, otherwise it was gone. And I just took it. I leapt off the cliff. And then as you say, I burned the ships, called up everybody that I knew. And I'm like, I'm an alcoholic. You got to help me out. And I'm doing this.
Jen, how did you know that was the moment to surrender? I understand it. And it's also, there's some effervescence about it, meaning it's hard to explain. My last beer, I was at a camping trip with some guys. My dog was staring at me. I heard the crickets. I noticed a bird in the tree. And I knew if I finished that last beer, I was a goner. So I drank half of it and dumped the rest out. How did you know to surrender in that moment? And maybe it's not academic or like in the brain, but what was the feeling like? You said, wait a second, this is the moment. If I don't do it now, it might not ever happen.
Well, it wasn't my alcoholic brain talking to me. I mean, I'm convinced because I have a higher power. I call my higher power God. I'm not overly religious. I'm very spiritual. And I feel like there was an intervention of sorts that I got pushed over the edge and it finally just clicked for me. I made the right decision at the right time. That's the only way I can explain it, because there was nothing in this alcoholic brain that was going to change that course.
And Jen, can you perhaps educate me a little bit? Jen, you said you were a father. I think you were a man before. How can that happen? You said you were in your basement drinking, and you're like, "Wait a second, I'm not a man. I'm a woman. I'm fascinated. I'm curious, and this is such a safe place, and it's part of your story."
Yeah.
And also,
So I kind of slipped there. I said I was a father. I am technically a father biologically. There's the whole rainbow or whatever, the whole variation of how people arrive to where they are in their transition. Some people know when they're 5 years old. I'm 50 plus, but I realized that there were signs, so many signs. I just ignored them. I didn't understand them. I had all these phobias, and then finally just hit me. And so I'm a transgender woman. That's how I live my life now. It's the life that I know I was meant to lead. I just didn't realize that until I got sober. That's part of my story. I started getting therapy. I had a gender therapist. We did a lot of work together. And it all kind of culminated with me talking to my sponsor, finishing up my 12 steps. And I said, I'm never going to be 100% happy, joyous, and free because I've got this one thing that I don't want to deal with. And I did not want to, nobody really, I'm not speaking for every transgender person, but quite a lot of us, it's like being an alcoholic. You don't ask for this. It's not a choice, but you have to make a choice at some place. It's live or die, literally. And I got to that point in talking to my sponsor. And I'm like, I've got to deal with this. So I finally did. And I came out, I talked to my wife, and that whole time I was going through the therapy and I was trying out, like, am I non-binary? Am I kind of this or that? Nothing seemed to fit. And it's like being an alcoholic. You come to the only possible conclusion, right? That is the answer. And I said, I'm a transgender woman. This is how I need to lead the rest of my life. I don't know how that's going to work for you, but I can't be like this anymore. I've got to show up and be my true self. And, ultimately she wasn't able to accept that, to have a relationship. I mean, oddly enough, we are great friends. I would consider her one of my best friends still. We co-parent really well. We get along. We hang out. We go out for lunch. We do normal people stuff. We're just not married. And it's made all the difference. My life is so much more full and rich. And, I'm not hiding myself anymore. I'm not afraid. I mean, there's some things going on right now that are concerning. But for me, at least I know who I am.
Jenn, thank you for educating me and the listeners and sharing that story. That's incredible. And when we quit drinking, I lucked out with RE, Recovery Elevator, RE, the whole quit drinking thing. It's not about adding additional layers. It's about rediscovering, recovering our authentic selves. And that's how your pathway looked. I found out I like the ukulele and goats. I got married and had a kid. For everybody, it's going to be completely different. And thank you, Jenn, for sharing that. You realized, wait a second, if I am to be authentic in this capacity without alcohol, really go after this journey in the correct fashion, this is where I have to go. I have to go from a male to a female.
In my drunk mind, I was anesthetizing myself and dealing with my own problems. And then I had to deal with them with a clear head. And, I think for me, it's less about that being my story than I realized if you don't deal with your problems will deal with you. And whether it's your gender or your resentments or your fears, if you don't take care of those things, they will come back and they will take you back out. So your fear may be, your job, your relationship, whatever it is, your resentment against somebody. And let me tell you what things look like for me in sobriety. I do live a happy, joyful, and free life. I move through life with much more ease. I got terminated from my job a year ago. I got fired after I got sober. It was one of the best things that ever happened to me. I took the summer off. I hung out with my kids. I got a better job where I don't travel as much. I really enjoy what I'm doing. I was thinking to myself, you should have fired me when I was a drunk, and now you're firing me when I'm sober. But everything happens for a reason. And now I get to spend more time with my kids. I get to do work that I actually enjoy. And I get paid the same amount of money. So what's not to like? And you know what?
Keep going.
As soon as I got fired, I hung up the phone or the Teams call, and I said, there's nothing that alcohol cannot make worse about this situation. So I went upstairs. I had, had a drink, a Coke or something, and I chilled out for a while. And the next day started the job search and having fun. Went to a lot more meetings. It was one of the best things that could have happened to me.
Jenn, a common denominator on this podcast is almost we quit drinking before, like, our higher self knows there's a bit of adversity waiting for us on the other side, that we know unequivocally if there's alcohol in our life, we would have been toast, right? You get fired, you're drinking, you're an alcoholic, boom, there's the edge, there's the precipice, you're going off it. So good on you for recognizing that intuition, that moment of surrender. I love hearing those spiritual moments. So talk to us about what it was like that first 30 days, the first 6 months, the first year. I heard AA a couple times there. How did you do it, Jenn?
Like I said, I went through an IOP program. I surrounded myself with community. Part of my story, just briefly, is my brother died of a drug overdose back in 2007. And I hated addicts and alcoholics. I thought they killed my brother. I
Hmm.
didn't realize that I was one. And honestly, recovering addicts and alcoholics are my best friends. I totally identify in with that. I understand where they are. And I built this community around myself of the people that I thought that I hated. And I realized I was one of them, and there was a community to be had, and I could be part of that. And I focused on my program. I focused on kind of incrementally. It was not easy. None of it was easy. I had some special challenges because of my gender transition, but just in general, my first tool was don't drink. And then I got pay it, play it forward. And then I got, do these other things. And as things kind of built, I had more and more tools, more and more ways to deal with it, more and more ways to cope. And it got easier. And then I plateaued probably around month 4, 6. And you're like, what am I doing? Is this really working? Am I really an alcoholic? Do I want to do this for the rest of my life? And then I had this other moment, right? Where it wasn't a spiritual moment, but I used to hate the term one day at a time. I despised that. Anytime somebody said that, I just roiled against it. But that is how I live my life now, one day at a time. I used to wish my time away, like, oh, next year will be better, or if I get this thing or whatever. I live where my feet are, here and now. I'm in this moment because I can't get today back. Because when tomorrow's around, today is gone, right? So I started living one day at a time, just living in the moment and just being present. And it took a long time. I had a lot of damage to take care of. I thought when I first recovered, I'm like, oh, the only person I hurt with my alcoholism was me. Little did I know the wreckage that I had left in my wake and the people that I had really harmed, not physically, but mentally. And it took me a long time to rebuild that trust, but I stuck with it. And I just said to myself, I'm like, okay, I'm going to apologize. I'm going to make these amends. And you don't have to accept it, but I'm going to continue to be the better person that I'm supposed to be. And if you come around to that, that's great. But if you can't, I totally understand that. I hope you'll give me another chance.
Jenn, you mentioned the word community, and we all need it. We are
Mm-hmm.
pack animals. We, specifically human beings, are
Mm-hmm.
wired for biological connection. Now, I encourage listeners, as Jenn has done, to leverage our drinking problem to find the most intense, tightly bonded community that's waiting for you ever. Right? In my history of doing this, or in my experience doing this, the glue of sobriety is the most intense glue that pulls communities together. Doesn't matter if you're gay, if you're straight, if you're trans, if you're tall, if you're white, if you're from a red state, if you're from a blue state, from Africa. It does not matter. Recovery
Mm-hmm.
is the most intense glue that I've ever come across. And I've been part of so many teams and organizations and sports teams. So, listeners, please leverage that. There's a community waiting for you to join you as who you are. Jenn, before we hit record, I asked you how you found out about this podcast, and you used the word supplement your program, right? Maybe
Mm-hmm.
some people think it's all AA, and you can't do anything non-AA. So this podcast is not affiliated with AA. We embrace it, but
Mm-hmm.
talk about maybe how people can supplement their program as a way you did, podcasts and AA.
For myself, like I said, I work a program with AA, but I'm just about recovery. I've got friends in Smart Recovery, Dharma, Celebrate Recovery. I don't care how you recover, just do it, and I will support you. And in terms of supplementing it, I would look for other things because I can't go to meetings all the time, but I can listen to podcasts, I can read a book, I can go for a walk, get some exercise. That's a great way. You've said this before, get those endorphins going, start feeling better about yourself. All those things I think really start to add up. And then you really, I think, have some, like for me, I'm always going to be an alcoholic. I'm never going to be able to get rid of this disease. And I can either die from it or live with it. And I'm going to live with it, but I'm never going to, the compulsion to drink has left me, but I still think about it. And if I have these tools, if I listen to a podcast, call a friend, all those things, that's one more thing in my defense line of defense to protect myself, to keep myself from taking that next drink. Because I'll tell you, I definitely have another drunk in me. I know for sure I could go out tomorrow and just keep on drinking. I do not know I have another recovery in me, and that scares me to death. And so I keep doing this because I do not want to find out, because it could literally end my life. in the life that I lead now, I mean, all these things that I get are because I'm sober. I have a family, I have friends, I have a job. I get to go and do whatever I want to. And it's because I'm sober.
Part of what keeps me behind the microphone, we're at week 567, consecutive weeks in a row, is what you just said. There's probably another drunk in me, right? I don't know if there's another recovery in me. So I'd
Mhm.
rather do way more than I even think is necessary for me to stay sober. So thank you, Jenn, for being part of my alcohol-free journey. And I'm honored to be part of yours. And we've got a bunch of listeners as well. Jen, before we hit record, you mentioned you prayed for guidance to say the right thing. That's a higher power. That's a God thing. I think you said you call it God. Can you
Mhm.
explain that part of your recovery and what role God has, and maybe give some advice to somebody who's getting tripped up on that concept?
Sure. I mean, when I came into this program, I did not believe in God. I didn't want to believe in God. And I just found a higher power that I happen to call God, but I just don't think you can do this alone. I did not, like I said, that moment that I had in that rehab, something intervened. And these other things, something happened. And I think it's something spiritual that happens. And for me, every morning I pray and I never pray for myself. And I did not pray for myself this morning. I prayed that I would be given, the strength and grace and some guidance on the message to send. I hope I sent the right message, and that I reached some listeners to give them some hope. But I really pray for other people. I pray for my friends that have cancer. I pray for my friends that don't have jobs. And that makes me feel great, that I'm helping and thinking about them and I'm not thinking about me, because that's what got me into this problem, was thinking about me and being that self-centered. So I pray every night when I go to bed that I got through another day sober and that I'm going to wake up sober. And look, I still stay up late and I party, but I do it with, you know, I do it with a Coke and a lime, and I wake up the next day sober.
I still stay up late in a party. I do it with the ukulele. I hang out with my goats at 10:30 p.m. Yeah, just it looks a lot different than it used to.
I just don't think you can white knuckle it and do it all on your own. I mean, even if your higher power is just your community, you just can't rely on yourself, because your thinking and your actions is how you got here, and something else is going to help get you out.
I, like you, Jen, was an atheist when I quit drinking. I could barely spell God or spirituality, any of that stuff. And I think I have this right. Well, I know Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of all time, the Swiss psychologist, 20th century Swiss psychologist. He penned letters with Bill W. to help him create AA. And I don't know if he told Bill W. this, but he later wrote that a spiritual intervention is required to overcome addictions. It's like there's a spiritual emergency where we're trying internally to break the emergency glass. We are trying to connect with something greater than ourselves. And the more I do this is week 567, the more I'm landing at the idea of, wait a second, there's a biological imperative that addiction satisfies. It's like forcing us to connect with something, to build a deeper electrical current with the universe, God, with whatever you want to call it. And it's a beautiful thing. Would
Mhm.
you agree?
I totally agree.
Jen, a couple more questions before we hit the rapid fire round. At month 4, you said, "Am I really an alcoholic?" Where are you at right now over 2 years? Do you question that? Are there cravings? Is there a voice that's like, was it really that bad?
Oh, sure. I mean, when I've gone through some stressful times, there's another period of time when I first started getting divorced. I started having suicidal ideation again because it was really, really hard. That's also when I started my transition. And I'd walk by and stare at that, beer display in the grocery store a little bit too long, drive by the ABC store and thinking about it a little bit too hard. But then, I had things, you've heard of 90 and 90. I did 90 and 30. I was going to 3 meetings a day sometimes. I was calling my sponsor. And the other thing that I did was I got help. I got counseling. I started taking an antidepressant, not one that I could abuse. And I felt like, I didn't, after having abused drugs, I really didn't want to do that. But, all my friends and my doctors, like, you got to do this. It's going to save your life, literally. And so that's what I did. And yeah, I mean, that ended up really surrendering to that and knowing that drugs, if they're used under medical supervision and for the right purpose, can be really helpful. It's when you start abusing them and that you are. But I still have cravings once in a while. I mean, look, I can look at a beer, especially one that I like, and see it on a table and taste it, but I'm not going to drink it. Those thoughts enter my head, but I don't have the compulsion. I'm not forced to feel like I've got to drink that thing. I can distract myself pretty easily and just kind of move on, and don't put myself in situations. It's like, I don't hang out in bars anymore. When I go on business trips, if people want to stay out and drink, I go to bed because I get tired and I'll read a book.
Jen, I think a gift that sobriety has given me, or at least in terms of do I still crave a drink, the gift has been space from the stimulus to my reaction. There's a time before I'd have a thought and a drink was in my hand, right? Now there's a thought, there's space, and then I can react. And I even put almost more emphasis or importance on the space. And so I'm editing the audio book right now for Dolce Vita, which comes out in like 2 days, 3 days. I'm so happy to hit the finish line. And I know that the space is equally important as the words that I speak. And these are kind of like big hitter spiritual topics that I don't think I am academically exploring. They're just landing. It's the space between the reaction is what has been gifted us. I can see the importance of the space. I'm not too sure I'm explaining that all that well, but it's amazing how there's more time before I react. One more question before we hit the rapid fire round. You've had so much change in your life the last couple of years, major positive change. Where do you see this going? What's on your bucket list, Jen?
So I do have a life achievement list because I think bucket lists sound rather tragic. So it includes things like surfing the west coast of Puerto Rico, seeing an F1 race in Japan, driving an exotic car. All these things are possible now. I mean, I can make these plans, and some of them, like, go hiking on the Appalachian Trail, which is just a couple hours from here, but I never did that. I finally did that with my kids. So it doesn't have to be all that exotic or that crazy, but, I'm going to learn a foreign language. I'm going to learn how to, do something more artistic, but I can do more now in a week sober than I could in a month drunk. And I look at that list, I check in on it once a month, and I am crossing things off. One of my goals was to take my kids to an Eagles game and share that experience with them. I did that. All these things are possible now because I'm sober. I never could have planned a weekend like that, or I would have gone on that weekend and it would have been miserable. I would have gotten drunk, acted like a jerk, all of these things now. So that bucket list, I mean, there's small things, there's big things, but they're things I can do. And they make my life worth living. I hope that I get through all of them, but if I don't, then I'm okay with that.
Jen, we have reached the rapid fire round. If you can answer these questions within 5 to 15 seconds, that would be great. Are you ready?
Bring it on.
All right. What's the one thing you've learned about yourself on this journey?
I learned that it's okay to be the real me. Don't have to be somebody else, and that I don't need alcohol or anything else to make my life better.
What would be country number 38?
Spain. I've actually never been to Spain.
Never been to Spain, but you love the food. You gotta go. You gotta go. What's your best sober moment?
December 2023, and I had tickets to go see Depeche Mode in concert at the Cap Center. I did that with a friend, totally sober, right at the beginning of my recovery. And ever since then, I've been going to concert after concert after concert.
What's been your best sober concert? Did you just say it, Depeche Mode, or what's another one that stands out?
I drove up to Philly for the night, so I drove 3 hours, saw the concert, and came home at 2 o'clock in the morning. I saw Blue October. I don't know if you know Blue October, but Justin Furstenfeld, the lead singer, is in recovery, and he talks about that really openly. And his music just meant so much to me in my sobriety with his recovery and that message. And that night, I cried, I laughed, I danced, and it was just a beautiful experience.
Listeners, Jen is wearing a Blue October t-shirt. And I know, the lead singer has done songwriting classes. We've had some people in our community do those. Big advocate for recovery. Jen, what's your favorite alcohol-free drink?
Coke with a lime.
What's the point of life?
I think to know who you really are and to just experience life and to do that and be of service to other people. So I finally know who I am, and now I can live a life of service and help other people.
New Year's is coming up just a couple days away. What advice can you give to somebody to make it through sober?
Well, I mean, I think early recovery, whenever recovery, but have a plan, put yourself in the right place, Surround yourself with people that are going to support you. And if you don't feel like you're in the right place, you can leave. You don't have to stay. So whether you're going to a sober-thon, you can go out to a bar, but you just got to know why you're there. You know, if you're there for the right reasons and you're there for, you know, a party with your friends that are supporting you and you're not at the bar drinking, having a Coke with lime, then you've got a plan. And if you start to feel uncomfortable with that, you know, you can always leave. No one's forcing you to be there.
Last question, Jenn. How do you pray? Not so much the words, but are you on your knees? Are you in a room by yourself? Do you look up? Do you look down? Are your hands clasped? Are you holding a holy rosary beads? What does that look like for you?
So in the morning, I sit on my bed and pray. I just sit quietly with my thoughts, and I do that every morning, first thing. I pray other times, sometimes when I'm on a walk in someplace quiet. I think any time that I can get into a quiet space and get someplace that kind of eliminates the distraction, but there's no right way to do it. I don't think you got to get on your knees. I don't think you got to look up. I think you just got to just whatever works for you.
And Jenn, before we depart, give listeners your own "you might need to ditch the booze if" line.
So you might need to ditch the booze if you drink all the beer out of your mini fridge and you promise yourself that next day on the way home from work, you won't stop by the grocery store and pick up another 12-pack of beer, and you do it anyway because you can't stop. And you do that over and over again.
Yeah, checks out for sure, Jenn. Such an honor to be here with you. Thank you so much for sharing your story on the podcast.
Thank you.
I want to share with you a practice that I've been doing since 2010. I use a note. It's called Evernote, but this could be done in a Word note or your iPhone note, where I write down my goals for the year, and then I return at the end of the year and say yes or no if I accomplish them. And I also write a recap of the year. I talk about my wins. I talk about my losses. I talk about where we want to put more energy in the future. Like I said, I started this in 2010. It's fun to go back and look at the goals of what I accomplished and what I have not. Now, what's at the top of that list of my goals for every year? Well, this is since 2014. That is to go another year away from alcohol. That's my sobriety. At the top of every single goal is my sobriety. Now, I first heard that concept before I got sober, and I was like, yeah, that's lame. You want me to put sobriety in front of my friends, family, life aspirations, and career? But it makes total sense. Without sobriety, everything in my life crumbles like a stale cookie. It's that simple. Speaking of, I'm going to go eat a cookie. Recovery Elevator, it all starts from the inside out. I love you guys. We can do this.
I see you, Savior, I see you, Savior, Almighty Savior, I see you, Savior, I see you, Savior, I see you, Savior, Almighty Savior, I see you, Savior.